They told me to escort 15 German women on a tour of Jackson. I thought they were joking, but this was the Army. Nobody jokes about orders. May 1945, Camp Clinton, Mississippi. The war in Europe had been over for exactly 4 days, and already the world felt different, smaller somehow. Like all that rage and fire had burned itself out, leaving nothing but smoke and questions nobody wanted to answer. I stood outside Colonel Thompson's office, my bad knee throbbing in the humid afternoon heat. The door was oak solid, the kind that made you think twice before knocking. Through the window, I could see the barbed wire fence stretching across the red Mississippi dirt, and beyond that rows of wooden barracks where 3,000 German prisoners waited to go home to a country that didn't exist anymore. My name is William Carter, Sergeant William Carter, if we're being formal about it. 28 years old, 6'2", born and raised on a tobacco farm outside Knoxville, Tennessee. I'd seen enough of Europe to last me 3 lifetimes. Normandy Beach with my boots full of blood that wasn't mine. The frozen hell of Ardennes where I watched good men die for 100 yards of snow. The Rhine crossing where a piece of shrapnel turned my right knee into something that clicked when it rained. 2 Purple Hearts, 1 Bronze Star, and a one-way ticket back to Mississippi to babysit prisoners while better men still fought in the Pacific. The door opened. Colonel James Thompson stood there, 50 years old, and ramrod straight with gray at his temples, and eyes that had seen things he'd never talk about. "Carter, come in." His office smelled like coffee and old paper. A fan turned lazy circles overhead, pushing the heat around without cooling anything. On his desk sat a folder, manila and thin, with my name typed across the front. "You wanted to see me, sir," Thompson gestured to a chair. I sat, trying not to wince when my knee bent. He noticed anyway. He always noticed. "How's the leg?" "Fine, sir." "Liar," he almost smiled. "But I appreciate the effort." He opened the folder, scanned it like he didn't already know what it said. I waited. "You learn patience in the Army or you learn nothing at all. You've been here 6 weeks, Sergeant. Light duty, mostly administrative work. How are you finding it?" "It's fine, sir." "That's the second time you've used that word." Now he did smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Let me be direct. I have a job for you. Unusual job. The kind that doesn't come with a manual." I straightened in my chair. "Sir, we have a group of German prisoners, female auxiliaries, Wehrmacht Helferinnen, nurses, communications staff, that sort of thing. 15 of them, ages 19 to 35. They've been here since last October, and by all accounts, they've been model prisoners. Quiet, cooperative, scared out of their minds." He pulled out a photograph, slid it across the desk. 15 women in faded gray uniforms standing in a line, faces blank as stone. One of them near the center had her chin up higher than the others. Dark hair pulled back severe. Eyes that looked straight at the camera like she was daring it to blink first. "The War Department has authorized a program," Thompson continued. "Selected prisoners get supervised trips to nearby cities. Let them see American life. Counter the propaganda they've been fed since they were children. Show them we're not the monsters Hitler said we were." I looked at the photograph, then back at him. "With respect, sir, I just buried 12 friends at Ardennes. You want me to take the enemy shopping?" Thompson leaned back in his chair. The leather creaked. Outside, somebody was shouting orders in the prison yard, and the words echoed flat across the empty space. "No, Sergeant, I want you to show them why we fought. There's a difference." The words sat heavy between us. I thought about Sarah, my baby sister. 22 years old Navy nurse, dead at Pearl Harbor, before the war even started for most people. I thought about her last letter, the one that arrived 3 days after the telegram. "I'm going to heal them, Billy. That's my job. That's what I do." "When do we leave, sir?" "Tomorrow, 0900 hours. You'll take 2 men, Private Wilson and Corporal Murphy. MP Jeep will follow the bus. Keep it low-key, but keep it secure. If anything goes wrong, you abort and return to base. Clear." "Crystal, sir." He closed the folder. "One more thing, Carter. These women believe we're going to chain them, torture them, kill them. That's what they've been taught. Show them different. Not for their sake, for ours. Because if we become what they think we are, then Hitler wins. Even dead, he wins." I stood, saluted, turned to leave. "Carter," I stopped at the door. "Your sister. She would have understood what you're about to do. Better than anyone." My throat tightened. "Yes, sir." The sun was setting over Camp Clinton when I walked to Barracks 7. Long shadows stretched across the compound, and the air smelled like red dirt and the mess hall's attempt at meatloaf. Guards stood at their posts, rifles slung casual but ready. They nodded as I passed. Barracks 7 sat apart from the others, surrounded by its own fence. Women's quarters. We didn't mix the populations for obvious reasons. Through the windows, I could see movement, shadows shifting behind thin curtains. The guard at the door, a kid from Alabama named Jenkins, straightened when he saw me. "Sergeant, at ease. I need to inspect the prisoners. Colonel's orders." He unlocked the door and I stepped inside. The barracks was exactly like the others, long and narrow with 2 rows of bunks running down each side. But it felt different. Quieter, maybe, or just more afraid. 15 women stood at attention beside their bunks, hands at their sides, eyes fixed straight ahead. They wore the same gray uniforms they'd been captured in, washed so many times the color had faded to something like fog. I walked down the center aisle, slowly, my boots loud on the wooden floor. None of them looked at me. They'd been trained not to. Halfway down, I stopped in front of the woman from the photograph, the one with her chin up. Up close, I could see she was younger than I'd thought, maybe 27, dark circles under her eyes, a thin white scar running from her left temple to her cheekbone, and hands that never stopped moving, fingers flexing like she was checking to make sure they still worked. "Name," I said. She hesitated, then in careful English, with a thick German accent, "Morrison." "Grace Morrison. You speak English?" "A little, I learned." "Where'd you learn?" "Hospital, American soldiers. I was nurse. They teach me words." I glanced at her hands again. The scar, the way she stood weight balanced like she was ready to run or fight or both. "You were at Caen, July 15th, 44. Field hospital, overrun by 1st Infantry." Her eyes flicked to mine for half a second, surprised before dropping back to the floor. "Yes." "How many did you save?" "Excuse me, how many soldiers did you save before we captured you?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I do not count. I just try to save." Sarah's voice echoed in my head. "I'm going to heal them. That's my job." I moved on, finished the inspection, came back to stand at the front of the barracks. All 15 of them were still rigid, waiting for the hammer to fall. "Tomorrow morning, 0900 hours, you'll board a bus. You're going on a supervised trip to Jackson. It's about 40 miles from here. You'll see the city, visit some shops, have lunch. Then you'll come back. No chains, no restraints. You'll be issued civilian clothes for the day. You will not try to escape, and you will not cause trouble." Questions. Silence. Then from Grace Morrison, "Sergeant, we will be chained." "Yes." I looked at her, really looked at her. Saw the fear there, buried deep but still visible if you knew how to look. The way her hands had gone, still waiting for confirmation of everything she'd been told about us. "No, Miss Morrison, you will not be chained. This is America. We don't chain women." "But Nazis say," "I don't care what the Nazis said. They lied about a lot of things. Tomorrow you'll see for yourself." I turned to leave, then stopped. "One more thing. There's no trick here. No trap. We're just going to show you a city. That's all. You can believe me or not. Your choice, Rabais." That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in my quarters, a bottle of whiskey on the desk in front of me unopened. I'd bought it in Knoxville on my way back from Europe, thinking maybe it would help with the dreams. The ones where I was back on Normandy Beach or in the Ardennes, or standing over the frozen body of a boy from Pittsburgh who'd been 19 years old and afraid of horses. Instead, I pulled out Sarah's letter. The paper was soft from being folded and unfolded so many times, and the ink had started to fade, but I knew every word by heart anyway. "Dear Billy, if you're reading this, then something's happened. I don't know what. But I know you, and I know you're blaming yourself. Stop it. Whatever happened wasn't your fault. War doesn't work like that. I want you to know I'm not afraid." That probably sounds like a lie, but it's not. I've seen too much to be afraid anymore. I've held hands with boys who called for their mothers. I've closed eyes that were still looking for home. And you know what I learned? We're all the same when we're broken. German, Japanese, American. Doesn't matter. Pain sounds the same in every language. So if you get the chance, Billy, I want you to remember that. Remember that the enemy is just somebody else's brother, somebody else's son. And when this is over, When all the shooting stops, try to see them as people. Not because they deserve it, but because we do. Because if we don't, then what the hell did we fight for? Love you always, Yerum. I folded the letter carefully, put it back in my pocket. Outside, the Mississippi night was full of crickets and the distant sound of a train. Somewhere in barracks, 715 women who'd been my enemy 6 months ago were lying awake wondering if tomorrow they'd be tortured or killed or worse. And I had to show them different. Not for them, for Sarah. For every soldier who died thinking we were the good guys. Morning came fast and hard. I was up before the sun, dressed in clean fatigues, knee-wrapped tight in bandages that wouldn't do much good, but made me feel better anyway. Private Tommy Wilson and Corporal Jake Murphy met me outside the motor pool at 0830. Wilson was a kid from Brooklyn, 22 years old with red hair and a face full of freckles that made him look about 15. Murphy was 30, Boston Irish, with knuckles that had seen their share of bar fights and a scar across his throat from a German knife that had missed his jugular by a quarter-inch. "Morning, Sarge," Wilson said. He was trying to look professional, but I could see the curiosity in his eyes. "This really happening? We're taking Krauts on a field trip." "German prisoners of war," I corrected. "And yes, Colonel's orders. You have a problem with that?" "No, sir. Just seems, I don't know, weird." Murphy lit a cigarette, squinted at the morning sun. "World's weird now, kid. Get used to it." The bus was already waiting, a standard Army transport with wooden bench seats and windows you could open, but not very far. The MP Jeep sat behind it, 2 soldiers inside with rifles across their laps. Not because we expected trouble, just because that's how it worked. At 0850, the women were let out of Barracks 7. They'd been issued dresses, simple cotton things, in various colors, nothing fancy but clean and new. They walked in a line, 2 by 2, eyes down, shoulders hunched like they expected to be hit. None of them wore the dresses right. The hems were uneven, the buttons mismatched. Their fingers had fumbled with the unfamiliar fasteners in the dim morning light. Grace Morrison walked at the front. She'd pulled her dark hair back into a severe bun, and the scar on her face stood out pale against her skin. She wore a blue dress that was too big for her, sleeves rolled up to her elbows, and she walked like she was heading to her own execution. At the bus steps, she stopped, looked back at the barracks. For a moment, I thought she might refuse to go. Then another woman, younger, maybe 19, stepped out of the barracks. She hadn't been issued a dress. She still wore her gray uniform. Her face was hard, jaw clenched, and when she saw Grace looking, she spat on the ground. Grace said something in German. The young woman replied, louder, angrier. Other prisoners were watching now, uncertain. I stepped forward. "Is there a problem?" Grace turned to me, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Not fear, determination. "No problem, Sergeant. Margaret, she chose not to come. Is her right." "What did she say to you?" "She say I am traitor for wanting to see truth." The young woman, Margaret, stared at Grace with pure hatred. Then she turned and walked back into the barracks, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. "And what did you say back?" Grace met my eyes. "I say I am tired of lies." I nodded slowly. "Get on the bus, Miss Morrison." They filed on one by one, taking seats near the back, like they wanted to be as far from us as possible. Wilson drove. Murphy sat up front with a clipboard checking names. I took a seat in the middle where I could see everyone. At exactly 900, we rolled out through the camp gates. For the first 10 minutes, nobody spoke. The women sat rigid, hands in their laps, staring at nothing. The only sound was the engine and the crunch of gravel under the tires. We passed the main camp buildings, the guard towers, the motor pool. Then we were on the open road heading east toward Jackson. The landscape was pure Mississippi. Red dirt and cotton fields stretching to the horizon. Pine trees thick along the roadside. A sky so blue it hurt to look at. And not a bomb crater in sight. Not a burned-out building. Not a single sign that war had ever touched this place. I watched the women's faces in the rearview mirror. Slowly, incrementally, they began to turn toward the windows. First one, then another, then all of them, pressing close to the glass like children, faces pale with shock, mouths forming silent questions. One of them started to cry, then another. Soon half of them were weeping silently, tears running down their faces as they stared out at fields that hadn't been touched by artillery, at farmhouses with smoke rising from chimneys, At children playing in front yards, throwing a ball back and forth, laughing. Grace Morrison sat by a window on the right side. She wasn't crying, but her hands gripped the edge of the seat so hard her knuckles had gone white. She was breathing fast, shallow, like she couldn't get enough air. Wilson glanced at me in the mirror, confused. Murphy shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I stood steadying myself against the lurching of the bus and moved to sit across the aisle from Grace. "You all right, Miss Morrison?" She didn't look at me, couldn't tear her eyes away from the window. "This is real." "Yes, ma'am." "No bombs, no destruction." "No, ma'am, war never came here." "But Nazis they say America is destroyed, like Germany. They say your cities are rubble, your people starve. They say they lied." She finally looked at me. Her gaze was hollow, drained of tears. How much else did they lie about? I didn't have an answer for that. Wasn't sure I wanted to give her one if I did. "We're about to find out," I said. We reached the outskirts of Jackson at 10:30 hours. The city rose out of the flat landscape like something from a dream. Brick buildings 3 and 4 stories tall, their walls clean and intact. Streets paved with asphalt, not torn up by tank treads. Cars moving in orderly streams, chrome gleaming in the sun. People on sidewalks walking casually, not hurrying to air raid shelters. The bus slowed as we entered downtown. Wilson drove carefully, following the route Thompson had marked on the map. Past the courthouse, its white columns bright against the blue sky. Past storefronts with windows full of goods, clothes and shoes and radios and things nobody in Germany had seen for years. Behind me, the silence had broken. The women were talking now, fast and urgent, in German, pointing at things, voices rising. One of them had her hand over her mouth like she might be sick. Grace Morrison hadn't moved. She sat perfectly still, staring out at the city, and her face had gone pale as paper. I leaned closer. "Miss Morrison." No response. "Grace," she blinked, turned to me. "We fought this. Excuse me, this." She gestured at the window, the city, everything. "This is what we tried to destroy. This is the enemy." "Yes." "Then we never had chance, did we?" "No, ma'am, you didn't." She nodded once slowly, like something had clicked into place in her head, something that made sense of everything that had come before. Then she said very quietly, "We were fools." The bus pulled up to a parking area near the city center. Murphy got out, first checked the area, gave the all clear. I stood turned to face the women. "All right, listen up. We're going to get off the bus now. You'll stay together as a group. No wandering off. Corporal Murphy and Private Wilson will be with us at all times. We're going to walk around a bit, maybe go into a few stores. You can look at things, ask questions if you want, but no trouble, understood?" 15 heads nodded in unison. "One more thing. The people here don't know who you are. To them, you're just visitors. Let's keep it that way. No need to start anything, clear." More nods. "All right, let's go." They filed off slowly, hesitantly, like they were stepping onto foreign soil, which I suppose they were. Wilson and Murphy flanked them, hands near their sidearms, but not on them. I brought up the rear, keeping my eyes moving, watching for problems. The sidewalk was busy. Shoppers moving in and out of stores. Businessmen in suits carrying briefcases. A woman pushing a baby carriage. A few people glanced at our group curiously, but nobody stopped. Nobody stared. Just regular folks going about their regular day in a city that had never heard an air raid siren. We walked half a block before one of the women stumbled. The younger one, maybe 22, who'd been sitting next to Grace. She caught herself on a lamppost, breathing hard, and I saw she was shaking all over. Grace put a hand on her shoulder, said something soft in German. The young woman shook her head, replied, and I heard the tears in her voice, even if I couldn't understand the words. "Everything all right?" I asked. Grace looked at me. "Evelyn, she is overwhelmed. She has not seen city like this since before war, not even in Germany." "Does she need to sit down?" "No, she will be okay. Just give her a moment." I nodded, gave them space. Murphy shot me a look, questioning, but I waved him off. Around us, Jackson went about its business, oblivious to the small drama playing out on its sidewalk. A man walked past eating an apple. A couple held hands. Somewhere nearby, a radio was playing big band music. After a minute, Evelyn straightened, wiped her eyes, nodded. "Okay," Grace said. "We go." Our first stop was Woolworth's, the big department store on Main Street. 5 floors of goods from clothing to housewares to toys. The kind of place that had everything and then some. I held the door open and the women filed inside. The change was immediate. They stopped just past the threshold, frozen, staring at the aisles, stretching into the distance. At shelves packed with merchandise. At displays of shoes and dresses and hats. At a lunch counter where people sat eating sandwiches and drinking coffee. At abundance so complete it must have seemed obscene. A clerk approached a young woman, maybe 20 years old, with blonde hair and a bright smile. Her name tag said Betty. "Good morning, can I help y'all find anything?" The German women shrank back instinctively. Betty noticed, looked confused. I stepped forward. "Morning, miss. These ladies are visiting from out of town. Just wanted to show them around a bit, if that's all right." "Oh, sure, y'all just look around all you want. Let me know if you need anything." She bounced away, cheerful and oblivious. Grace watched her go, then turned to me. "She does not know. No, ma'am." "Should we tell her?" "No need. Like I said, you're just visitors today." Grace translated for the others. They relaxed slightly, though their eyes never stopped moving, taking in everything, trying to process what they were seeing. They drifted through the store in a loose group, touching things carefully, reverently, like the merchandise might bite. A bolt of silk fabric, a leather shoe, a wool coat with real buttons. Things that had been luxuries in Germany even before the war, and impossible dreams after. Evelyn stopped at a display of stockings. Real silk, not the painted-on kind German women had been using for years. She picked up a pair, held them to the light, and started crying again. Soft, almost silent, but her shoulders shook. Grace went to her, put an arm around her, held her while she cried in the middle of Woolworth's on a Tuesday morning. Betty, the clerk, came back, saw Evelyn crying, looked concerned. "Is she okay? Can I get her some water or something?" "She's fine," I said. "Just a long trip, lot to take in." "Oh, sure, I bet y'all come far." "Far enough." Betty smiled again, that same bright, uncomplicated smile. "Well, welcome to Jackson. Hope y'all enjoy your visit." She moved on to help another customer. Grace watched her go, then looked at me. "She is kind. Most people are once you give them a chance." Nazi said Americans are monsters. Nazis said a lot of things. Yes, her voice was very quiet. They did. After 10 minutes in the store, Betty came back with a tray. 15 glasses filled with dark liquid and ice. "Thought y'all might be thirsty. Coca-Cola on the house, courtesy of Mr. Hendricks, the manager. He saw y'all come in and wanted to make sure you felt welcome." She set the tray down on a nearby counter, still smiling. The German women stared at the glasses like they might contain poison. Nobody moved. Grace looked at me. "Is safe?" "Yes, ma'am. It's just Coke. Soda. You'll like it." "But why they give us free?" "Because you're guests. That's what we do for guests." She picked up a glass, slowly sniffed it, took a tiny sip. Her eyes went wide. She took another sip, bigger, then drank half the glass in one go. "Is sweet. Very sweet." "That's the sugar. We've got plenty of it." One by one, the other women followed Grace's lead, taking glasses, drinking cautiously at first, then more eagerly. Some of them smiled. Actually smiled, maybe for the first time since they'd been captured. Wilson leaned close to me, keeping his voice down. "Sarge, why are they acting like they've never had a Coke before?" "Because they probably haven't, Wilson. Germany's been rationing since '39. Sugar's been worth more than gold for years." Seriously. Seriously. He watched them drink, his young face confused and maybe a little sad. "Man, that's rough." "Yeah," I said, "it is." We left Woolworth's 20 minutes later. The women walked differently now, shoulders a little straighter, eyes a little brighter. The weight hadn't lifted exactly, but maybe it had shifted. Made room for something other than fear. The bakery was 2 blocks down Main Street, small place, family owned, with a green awning and a window display of fresh bread. We were 50 feet away when I noticed the women slowing down, then stopping completely. Standing in the middle of the sidewalk, 15 of them, breathing in deep like they were trying to inhale the whole world. Grace Morrison had her eyes closed. Her hands were shaking again. I walked up beside us. "Miss Morrison." She opened her eyes. They were wet. "The smell. It's just bread." No, she shook her head. Not just bread, is real bread. White bread, fresh bread, not, not what we had. What did you have? Black bread, made from sawdust and acorns, hard like stone. We share one loaf for 5 people 3 days, and even that was luxury toward the end. Behind her, the other women were crying again, not loudly, just tears running down faces while they stood there smelling bread like it was the finest perfume. Murphy caught my eye, gestured at the bakery. I nodded. 5 minutes later, I came out with 20 loaves of fresh white bread wrapped in paper. Paid for it myself, didn't bother with a receipt. Some things shouldn't go in reports. I handed them out, one to each woman, extras for the ones who looked the hungriest. They took them carefully like they were made of glass. Grace held hers in both hands, staring at it, not eating, just staring. Go ahead, I said. It's yours. She looked up at me. Why you do this? Because you're hungry. But we are enemy. No, Miss Morrison, you're people. The enemy is whoever made you go hungry. She broke off a piece of bread, put it in her mouth, chewed slowly. Then she dropped to her knees right there on the sidewalk and sobbed. Deep, wrenching cries that came from somewhere down in her bones. Other women knelt beside her, holding their bread, crying together while people walked past and pretended not to notice. Wilson came up beside me. His face was red and he wouldn't meet my eyes. Sarge, why are we giving them food? They're the enemy. My cousin died at Bulge. My best friend lost his legs at Normandy. And we're buying them bread. I turned to face him. Kept my voice level, but let him hear the steel underneath. No, private. We're not buying them bread. We're showing them what they lost and what they never had a chance to win. I don't understand. Look at them, Wilson. Really look. They're not soldiers. They're nurses and radio operators and girls who joined because they thought it was the right thing to do. And now they're kneeling on a sidewalk in Mississippi crying because somebody gave them bread. You want to hate them, go ahead, but don't confuse them with the men who started this war. Those men are dead or in cells. These women are just trying to figure out how to live with what they did. Wilson looked at the women, then back at me. Some of the anger had gone out of his face, replaced by something else. Uncertainty maybe, or just exhaustion. It's complicated, huh? Everything's complicated now, Wilson. After they'd cried themselves out and eaten some of the bread, we moved on. The bookstore was next, a small place called Ellis Books, tucked between a hardware store and a pharmacy. The windows were full of novels and histories and children's books, bright covers, promising adventures and escapes. The woman behind the counter was in her 50s, gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a blue dress and sensible shoes. A wedding ring on her left hand and a gold pin on her collar that said Gold Star Mother. Her son had died somewhere. The pin meant she'd lost him in the war. She looked up when we came in, saw me in uniform, saw the women behind me. Her face went carefully neutral. Good morning, Sergeant. Morning, ma'am. Mind if we browse a bit? Not at all. Everyone's welcome in my shop. The women spread out slowly, touching books, pulling them from shelves, looking at covers, even though most of them couldn't read English. The bookstore owner watched them, her eyes sharp and knowing. After a minute, she walked over to me. They're German, aren't they? No point lying. Yes, ma'am. Prisoners of war. We're showing them the city. I see. She was quiet for a moment. My son died at Normandy. He was 23. I'm sorry for your loss, ma'am. Are you Sergeant? The question wasn't hostile, just honest. I met her eyes. Yes, ma'am, I am. I was at Normandy too. Lost a lot of good men there. She studied my face, reading something there. Then she nodded. I believe you. Grace Morrison had wandered over to the fiction section. She pulled out a worn copy of Tom Sawyer, opened it, ran her fingers over the pages, even though she probably couldn't read half the words. The bookstore owner, Mrs. Ellis, according to the sign on the counter, walked over to her. You like Mark Twain? Grace looked up, startled. I do not read English very good. That's all right, dear. It's a good book anyway. About a boy and a river and freedom. She paused. Where are you from? Hamburg, ma'am. Mrs. Ellis was quiet for a long moment. I hear Hamburg was bombed quite badly. Yes, is gone now, most of it. I'm sorry. Grace's eyes went wide. You sorry, but your son? My son died fighting a war. You didn't start that war, did you? No, ma'am, but I helped. I was nurse. I saved German soldiers so they can go fight more. And I'm sure those soldiers had mothers who were grateful you saved them. Mrs. Ellis reached out, put a hand on Grace's shoulder. War makes us all do things we wish we hadn't. But it's over now. Time to stop fighting. Grace's face crumpled. She tried to hold it together. I could see her trying, but it was too much. She broke, tears streaming down her face, and Mrs. Ellis pulled her into a hug. Just held her while she cried, this German woman who'd helped kill her son and didn't say anything. Just held on. I turned away, pushed through the bookstore door into the harsh afternoon light. The sun was bright on the sidewalk, and the air was thick with heat and humidity, and I stood there trying to remember how to breathe. Murphy followed me out, lit a cigarette, didn't offer me one because he knew I didn't smoke. You okay, Sarge? Yeah, just needed some air. That was something in there, Sarah. Yeah. You think we're doing the right thing, showing them all this? I don't know, Murphy, but I know Thompson's right about one thing. If we don't show them we're different, if we just hate them because they're German, then we're not any better than what we fought against. He took a long drag on his cigarette. I miss when the war was simple. War was never simple. We just told ourselves it was so we could pull the trigger. Inside, Mrs. Ellis was talking to Grace, both of them calmer now. When we came back in, Mrs. Ellis handed Grace the copy of Tom Sawyer. Take this, dear. Read it when you get home. Remember that America isn't just a place. It's an idea, and ideas can't be bombed. Grace clutched the book to her chest like it was the most valuable thing in the world. Thank you. I will remember. As we left the store, Grace turned back to Mrs. Ellis. The older woman stood in the doorway watching us go, and for just a second, their eyes met. Some understanding passed between them, something I couldn't name. Then we were walking away back into the bright Mississippi sun. The afternoon heat was building. We stopped for lunch at a small diner called Betty's, the kind of place with red vinyl booths and a jukebox in the corner playing Bing Crosby. The owner was an older woman, maybe 65, with iron gray hair and hands that had seen hard work. Her name tag said Aunt Ruth. She took one look at our group and her eyebrows went up, but she didn't say anything. Just led us to a cluster of tables in the back and brought out menus. The women stared at the menus like they were written in hieroglyphics, which to them they probably were. Grace translated the best she could, and slowly, hesitantly, they ordered. Burgers and fries, mostly. Simple food, but more than most of them had eaten in months. When the food came, some of them couldn't eat it. Their stomachs had shrunk, or their bodies weren't used to rich food anymore, or they were just too overwhelmed. Evelyn took one bite of her burger and ran to the bathroom to throw up. Grace followed her, came back 10 minutes later, looking exhausted. She will be okay. Just too much. Take your time. We're not in a hurry. Grace sat down, picked at her fries. Sergeant Carter, can I ask question? Sure. Why you do this? Why you show us America? Why not just keep us in camp until we go home? I thought about it for a minute. About Sarah and her letter. About 12 men I'd buried in Belgium. About everything that had brought me to this moment, sitting in a Mississippi diner with 15 German women who looked at me like I held the answers to questions they didn't know how to ask. Because somebody has to break the cycle, I finally said. The hating and the killing and the whole damn mess. And maybe if you see we're not monsters, maybe you'll go home and tell people. Maybe some of them will listen. Maybe it'll make a difference. You think it will? I don't know, but I have to try. She looked at me for a long time, then nodded. Your sister. She was like you, yes. She tried to make things better. I stiffened. How did you know about my sister? I see it the way you look at me sometimes. Like you see someone else. She paused. I am sorry for your loss. She died at Pearl Harbor, Navy nurse, Japanese bombers. Then you have reason to hate, to want revenge. Maybe, but revenge doesn't bring her back. And I think she'd be ashamed if I used her death as an excuse to be cruel. Grace was quiet. Then she said something in German to the other women. They all turned to look at me, and as one, they bowed their heads. A moment of silence for a nurse they'd never met in a diner in Mississippi while Bing Crosby sang about White Christmas on the jukebox. When they raised their heads, Aunt Ruth was standing by the table. Her face was serious, and I saw she'd heard at least some of what we'd said. "Y'all are German, aren't you?" The table went silent. Grace nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am. We are prisoners of war." "I see." Aunt Ruth looked at each of them, then at me. "I lost my husband at Iwo Jima and my brother at the Bulge." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. "But I'll tell you something," she continued. "I can hate the war all I want. I can hate what it did to my family. But I won't hate people I've never met for crimes they didn't commit. You girls eat up, no charge, and welcome to America." She turned and walked back to the counter, leaving 15 German women and 3 American soldiers sitting in stunned silence. Grace stood up, walked to the counter. When Aunt Ruth turned, Grace bowed deeply from the waist, the German way, formal and full of respect. "Thank you, ma'am. We are not worthy." Aunt Ruth reached out, lifted Grace's chin with one calloused hand. "Honey, everybody's worthy of a meal." I turned away, pushed through the diner door into the sweltering afternoon, stood on the sidewalk with the Mississippi sun beating down and my bad knee aching and something burning behind my eyes. Wilson came out after me, his freckled face confused and maybe a little bit proud. "Sarge, are you okay?" "Yeah, Wilson, I'm just remembering what it means to be American." The bus ride back to Camp Clinton should have been triumphant, or at least relieved. Instead, it was silent. The kind of silence that settles over people who've seen something they can't unsee, learned something they can't unlearn. The women sat in their seats, some staring out windows, some holding the things they'd been given. Loaves of bread, a book, empty Coca-Cola glasses they'd asked to keep, tokens of a world they'd been taught to hate and found themselves unable to. Grace Morrison sat by herself 3 rows from the front. The copy of Tom Sawyer was open in her lap, but she wasn't reading it, just staring at the pages while tears ran down her face and dripped onto the paper, making the ink run. I moved to sit across from her. She didn't acknowledge me, but I knew she knew I was there. "You all right, Miss Morrison?" She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was barely a whisper. "We were told you were monsters, that you would chain us, torture us, kill us, that America was evil and must be destroyed." She looked up at me, and her eyes were hollow. "But you gave us bread and Coca-Cola and kindness. Why, because that's who we are." "Then who are we? If you are good, what does that make us?" I didn't have an answer for that. Wasn't sure there was one. "You're people who believed a lie," I finally said, "and now you know the truth. What you do with that is up to you." She looked back at the book in her lap. "I wasted my life for a lie." "You're 27 years old. Your life isn't over." "Feels like it is." "Then make it count for something. Go home. Tell people what you saw here. Fight the next lie before it takes root. That's how you make it count." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she closed the book, held it against her chest, and nodded. We pulled through the gates of Camp Clinton at 1700 hours. The sun was starting to sink, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The women filed off the bus slowly back to being prisoners, back to reality. The dresses would be collected and cleaned. The bread would be eaten or saved. The memories would fade maybe, or maybe they'd burn forever. Grace was the last one off. She stopped at the bottom of the steps, turned back to me. "Thank you, Sergeant Carter, for not chaining us." "You're welcome, Miss Morrison." "And Sergeant, yes. Your sister, she would be proud of you, I think." My throat went tight. "How would you know? Because I am nurse too, and I know what we believe, that healing is always better than hurting, always." She walked away toward the barracks, and I watched her go. Murphy came up beside me, clipboard in hand. "All accounted for, Sarge. No incidents. Colonel will be pleased." "Yeah. You okay?" "Yeah, just tired. Long day." "Yeah." But it wasn't over yet. As the women reached the barracks, the door burst open. Margaret Foster stood there still in her gray uniform, face twisted with rage. She shouted something in German, loud enough for everyone to hear. Then she spat on the ground and slammed back inside. Grace stood very still for a moment. Then she called after Margaret, her voice steady. Margaret appeared in the doorway again, and they exchanged words. Sharp, angry words. Then Grace turned her back and walked inside, followed by the others. Wilson looked at me. "What was that about?" "Nothing we can fix," I said. "That night I wrote my report for Colonel Thompson. kept it brief and factual. The women had seen Jackson. No incidents, mission accomplished. I didn't mention the crying or the bread or Mrs. Ellis or Aunt Ruth. Some things don't belong in reports. Instead, I took out Sarah's letter one more time, read it by the light of a single bulb in my quarters, the words familiar as prayer. Remember that the enemy is just somebody else's brother, somebody else's son, and when this is over, when all the shooting stops, try to see them as people. I folded the letter carefully, put it back in my pocket over my heart. I'm trying, Sarah, I said to the empty room. I'm trying. Outside, the Mississippi night was thick with heat and crickets and the distant sound of trains. In barracks, 715 German women lay in their bunks, holding pieces of bread and empty glasses, and a book about a buoy and a river and freedom. And somewhere in the darkness, maybe Sarah was watching. Maybe she was proud. I hope so. God, I hope so. The screaming woke me at 0300 hours, not unusual. Men screamed in their sleep at Camp Clinton every night, reliving Normandy or Bastogne or a dozen other places where the world had tried to kill them. But this was different, higher pitched, coming from the wrong direction. I was out of bed before I was fully awake, pulling on pants and boots, grabbing my sidearm. My knee protested shooting pain up my leg, but I ignored it. Outside, other men were emerging from their quarters, confused and alert. The screaming was coming from Barracks 7. I ran, or tried. My knee made it more of a hobble, but I covered the distance fast enough. Jenkins was already at the door, rifle unslung, but not raised. What happened? Don't know, Sarge. Started maybe 2 minutes ago. Sounds like a fight. I pushed past him, threw open the door. The barracks was chaos. Women shouting in German, some trying to separate two figures grappling on the floor between the bunks. I recognized Grace Morrison, immediately, blood streaming from her nose, trying to shield her face. On top of her was Margaret Foster, 19 years old and full of rage, fists swinging. Enough! My voice cut through the noise like a gunshot. Margaret froze, looked up at me with wild eyes. For a second, I thought she might come at me too. Then Grace shoved her off, scrambled backward. I stepped between them. What the hell is going on here? Margaret spat words at me in German, fast and furious. Grace wiped blood from her face, spoke in English. She say I am traitor, that I cooperate with Americans, that I betray Führer. Your Führer is dead, I said, looking at Margaret. Hitler shot himself like a coward. The war is over. You lost. Margaret's face went red. She understood more English than she let on, I realized. She shouted something else in German, pointing at Grace. What did she say? Grace's voice was steady despite the blood. She say we were winning. That Nazi propaganda say we win. That everything you show us is, how you say, movie set, fake. I looked at Margaret, this girl who was barely older than Sarah had been. Saw the desperation in her eyes, the need to believe in something, even when that something had turned to ash. Private Jenkins, get the medic. Miss Morrison needs attention. Yes, Sarge. I turned back to Margaret. You want to think it's all fake, fine, but you keep your hands to yourself. Next time you assault another prisoner, you'll be in isolation. Clear. She didn't answer, just glared at me with hate that felt almost physical. I helped Grace to her feet. Her nose was bleeding freely and I could see bruises forming on her cheeks. Come on, let's get you cleaned up. Outside, the medic was already approaching with his bag. I led Grace to a bench near the barracks, sat her down. The medic, a corporal named Davis from Ohio, examined her nose with gentle efficiency. Not broken, just bloodied. She'll be fine. Thanks, Davis. He left antiseptic and bandages, headed back to his quarters. Grace and I sat in silence while I cleaned the blood off her face. Her hands were shaking. Why did you go back? I asked, after what she said when we left. Because she is only 19. Because she is scared. Because I remember being like her. When were you like her? Grace was quiet for a long moment. When I was 20. When Nazis say Jews are not human. When they say we must purify Germany. When they make it sound like patriotism, not murder. She looked at me. I believe them, Sergeant. For a long time, I believe. What changed? I see in hospital we have Jewish doctor. Old man, very kind. Nazi come one day, take him away. He never come back. And I realize I realize I had helped kill kind old man because someone tell me I should. I finished bandaging her nose, sat back. The night was cooler now, almost comfortable. Overhead stars scattered across the sky like shrapnel frozen in mid-flight. You can't save Margaret, I said. Some people don't want to be saved. I know, but I have to try because no one tried to save me. I had to save myself, and it was very hard. We sat there until the sky started to lighten in the east. Then I walked her back to the barracks, made sure Margaret was in a different bunk section, and finally headed back to my own quarters. I didn't sleep. Just lay on my cot staring at the ceiling, thinking about 19-year-old girls full of hate and 27-year-old women trying to atone for believing lies. Colonel Thompson called me in at 0900 hours. Heard there was an incident last night. Yes, sir. Margaret Foster attacked Grace Morrison. Morrison refused to press charges. Thompson leaned back in his chair. Foster is a problem. The hardliners always are. But she's also a child, barely older than my own daughter. With respect, sir, age doesn't excuse assault. No, it doesn't, but it might explain it. He pulled out a file, opened it. Margaret Foster joined the Wehrmacht Helferinnen at 17. Father was SS killed at Stalingrad. Mother died in the Dresden bombing. No other family. She has nothing left except her beliefs, and now we're taking those away too. So what do? We keep trying. What else can we do? He closed the file. I have new orders for you, by the way. My stomach sank. Sir, you're being reassigned back to Tennessee, effective October 1st. It was currently late August, 5 weeks. I'll finish what I started here first, sir. I know you will. That's why I recommended you for this job in the first place. He stood, extended his hand. You did good work yesterday, Carter. Better than I expected. Those women will remember what they saw for the rest of their lives. Some of them will remember it wrong, sir. Maybe, but most won't. That's good enough. I saluted, left his office with my knee aching and my head full of questions I couldn't answer. September came hot and humid. The camp fell into a routine that felt almost normal. Work details, meals, mail, call lights out. The German prisoners, male and female, waited for repatriation that kept getting delayed. Meanwhile, the world outside moved on. Japan surrendered. The war was over everywhere, all at once. I started teaching English classes in the evenings, not ordered to. Just something to do, something to make the waiting feel less like wasting time. To my surprise, 12 of the 15 women from the Jackson trip showed up the first night. Grace Morrison sat in the front row. Why are you doing this, Sergeant? She asked in her careful English. Because you'll need it when you go home. Why we need English in Germany? Because the world is smaller now, and it's going to keep getting smaller. Better to speak the language. Over the following weeks, I watched them learn. Simple words at first. Hello, thank you, please, how are you? Then longer sentences, more complex thoughts. Grace progressed the fastest. She had a natural ear for languages, and she studied every night after lights out by the dim bulb in the barracks. One evening after class, she stayed behind while the others filed out. Sergeant Carter, can I ask personal question? Depends on the question. Why you are kind to us? Really? I know what you say before about breaking cycle, but there is more, yes. Something personal. I thought about lying or deflecting, but there was something in her eyes that made dishonesty feel worse than vulnerability. My sister, Sarah, she was a nurse like you, died at Pearl Harbor before she ever got a chance to save anyone. And I think if she'd lived, if she'd been the one captured, I'd hope someone would treat her the way I'm trying to treat you. Grace nodded slowly. You see your sister when you look at me. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes. That is hard, to see ghost in living person. Yeah, it is. She stood, moved toward the door, then stopped. Your sister, she sound like good person. Like she would understand what you do here. I hope so. She would, I am sure. After she left, I sat alone in the empty classroom, surrounded by chairs and a chalkboard with English words written in my handwriting. Outside, the cicadas were singing their endless song. I thought about Sarah, about Grace, about all the ways the war had tangled people together in knots nobody knew how to untie. The next planned activity came in mid-September. The War Department was pushing its re-education program hard now, trying to deprogram years of Nazi indoctrination before sending prisoners home. Part of that meant showing them what their government had done, what they'd been complicit in, whether they knew it or not. Colonel Thompson called a mandatory assembly. All prisoners, male and female, packed into the base theater. Guards at every exit. A projector set up at the back of the room. I stood against the wall watching the prisoners file in. The men looked sullen, resigned. They'd heard rumors about what was coming. The women looked confused. Grace caught my eye as she entered, questioning. I couldn't give her any reassurance. Thompson stood at the front. You are about to see footage taken by American and British forces at concentration camps in Germany and Poland. Bergen-Belsen, Dachau, Auschwitz. This is not propaganda. This is not staged. This is what your government did in your name, and you will watch all of it. He nodded to the projectionist. The lights went down. I'd seen the footage before. At Dachau, I'd seen it in person. But watching it again, hearing the gasps and sobs from the audience, made it fresh. Made it real all over again. Bodies stacked like cordwood. Living skeletons staring at cameras with dead eyes. Mass graves bulldozed full. Children who looked 70 years old. Ovens, gas chambers, piles of hair and shoes and glasses. The theater filled with the sounds of people being sick, running to bathrooms, crying, screaming that it wasn't real, couldn't be real, had to be fake. Margaret Foster's voice cut through the darkness. Lies, propaganda, this is not real. But even she sounded less certain than before. When the lights came back up, half the audience looked like they'd been hit by artillery. Pale, shaking, staring at nothing. The other half looked angry, defiant, refusing to accept what they'd seen. Grace Morrison sat perfectly still. Not crying, not moving, just staring at the blank screen with an expression I couldn't read. I found her afterward, sitting outside the barracks alone. She held the copy of Tom Sawyer Mrs. Ellis had given her, but she wasn't reading it, just holding it like an anchor. I sat down beside her, didn't say anything. Sometimes silence is the only thing that makes sense. After a long time, she spoke. I knew. What? I knew, not details, not camps, but I knew they were taking Jews. I knew they were taking gypsies and homosexuals and anyone they say is undesirable, and I did nothing. She looked at me. I am guilty, not like SS, not like guards, but I am guilty. What could you have done? I could have asked questions. I could have refused to serve. I could have said no. Her voice broke. I could have been brave, and they would have killed you. Yes, maybe, but at least I would not have to live with this. I didn't have an answer for that. Nobody did. The theater had been full of people grappling with the same realization. Some would accept it, some would deny it, some would break under the weight of it. There's a soldier here, I said. Private Thomas Becker, born in Munich, came to America when he was 10, joined the army in 42. You want to know why? She nodded. Because his family was Jewish. 23 people. Parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. He's the only one who made it out. The only one. Grace's fingers tightened on the book. He hates us. No, he pities us, which is somehow worse. Can I talk to him? Wow. Because I need to hear it from someone who lost everything. I need to understand what I helped do. I arranged the meeting for the next day. Private Becker agreed, though he looked uncertain about it. We met in an empty classroom, just the three of us. Becker sat on one side of a desk, Grace on the other. I stood by the door. Grace spoke first. Private Becker, my name is Grace Morrison. I was nurse in Wehrmacht, and I want to say I am sorry. Becker looked at her. He was 25, thin with dark hair and eyes that carried a weariness no 25-year-old should know. Sorry for what specifically? For not asking questions, for not refusing to serve, for helping soldiers who kill your family. Did you know about the camps? No, not details. But I knew something was wrong. I chose not to look. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Becker leaned forward. My grandmother was 78 years old. She baked bread every Friday, best bread in Munich. The SS came for her in 42, loaded her into a truck with 30 other people. I never saw her again. Grace held his gaze, refusing to look away even as tears filled her eyes. My cousin Rachel was 6 years old. She liked to draw pictures of horses. Gone. I am sorry. My father played violin. My mother taught piano. My uncle made furniture. All of them gone, erased, like they never existed. I am sorry. Sorry doesn't bring them back. His voice cracked, betraying the emotion he tried to hide. Sorry doesn't undo what was done. Sorry is just a word. Then what can I do? Becker leaned back, closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. You can remember. You can go home and tell everyone who will listen what happened. You can make sure it never happens again. That's all any of us can do now. Grace nodded. I will. I promise. After she left, Becker sat there staring at his hands. I walked over, put a hand on his shoulder. That was hard. Thank you. Did it help anything? I don't know, maybe. Ask me in 50 years. He left. I stood alone in the classroom thinking about grandmothers who baked bread and 6-year-olds who drew horses and all the ways the world had gone wrong. The incident with Margaret Foster came 2 weeks later. Jenkins found her in the latrine with her wrist cut, blood pooling on the concrete floor. We got her to the infirmary in time, barely. The medics stitched her up, gave her sedatives, put her under observation. Colonel Thompson ordered a psychiatric evaluation. The doctor, a captain from Philadelphia, spent 3 hours with her. His report was blunt. Margaret Foster was suffering from what they were starting to call shell shock, though she'd never been in combat. The war had broken something in her, and showing her the truth had broken what was left. She needs treatment, the doctor said. Real treatment, more than we can give her here. Will she get it in Germany? Thompson asked. I don't know, but she needs to be separated from the other prisoners. She's a danger to herself and possibly others. So Margaret went to isolation, a small room, locked door, a guard posted outside. I visited her once. She wouldn't look at me. Just sat on her cot, staring at the wall, hands bandaged, eyes empty. What go? I asked. She didn't answer for a long time. Then in halting English, if it is all lie, then I am nothing. Better to be nothing than to be part of that. You're 19 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. What life? I have no family, no country, no beliefs. What is left? The chance to start over, to become something better. She laughed. It was the saddest sound I'd ever heard. You do not understand. I cannot be better. I can only be less bad. And that is not enough reason to live. I reported the conversation to Thompson. He added it to her file, shook his head. We're going to lose her, he said. Either she'll try again or she'll go home and do it there. Some people can't live with what they've learned. Can we stop her? How lock her up forever, send her home to a country that doesn't exist anymore? There's no good answer here, Carter. He was right, there wasn't. October arrived with cooler weather and my official discharge papers. October 30th would be my last day at Camp Clinton. Part of me was relieved. Part of me felt like I was abandoning something unfinished. The night before I left, I found Grace sitting outside the barracks looking at the stars. Can't sleep, I asked. Too much thinking. I sat down beside her. About what? About going home. About what I will find there. About whether I am strong enough to do what I promised. You are. How do you know? Because you're still here. Still trying. Margaret gave up. You didn't. She was quiet for a moment. Sergeant, can I tell you something? Something I have not tell anyone? Sure. When I was captured, I was relieved. Is terrible thing to say, but is true. I was so tired of war. So tired of seeing boys die. So tired of being afraid every moment. And when your soldiers captured us, I thought finally it is over. Even if they kill me, at least it is over. They didn't kill you. No, they did something worse. They showed me we were wrong. They showed me I wasted 6 years believing lies. And now I have to live with that. Have to go home and face it. And I do not know if I am strong enough. You are. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. She smiled just a little. You are stubborn man, Sergeant Carter. So I've been told. We sat in comfortable silence watching the stars wheel overhead. Somewhere in the camp, a man was playing the harmonica, something slow and sad and beautiful. Will you write to me? Grace asked. After I go home, I would like to know you are okay. If you write to me first, let me know you made it. Deal. She extended her hand. I shook it. Thank you, Sergeant Carter, for not chaining us, for showing us truth, for treating us like people. You are people, Miss Morrison, that's the point. The next morning, I packed my duffel and said my goodbyes. Wilson and Murphy shook my hand, wished me luck. Colonel Thompson gave me a letter of recommendation and his personal thanks. The German prisoners I'd taught lined up to say goodbye. Grace stood at the end of the line. Be safe, Sergeant. You too, Miss Morrison. Remember your promise. I will never forget. I climbed into the Jeep that would take me to the train station. As we drove away, I looked back at Camp Clinton one last time. Saw the barracks, the fences, the guard towers. Saw 15 women standing together, watching me go. Grace raised her hand in a wave. I waved back. Then we turned a corner, and they were gone. The train to Tennessee was crowded with soldiers going home. We didn't talk much, just sat in our seats watching America roll past the windows. Fields and towns and cities untouched by war. A country that had won, but would spend generations figuring out what victory meant. I thought about Grace, about Margaret, about all the complicated ways the war had broken people. About Sarah and her letter, and her belief that the enemy was just somebody else's brother. She'd been right. She'd been right about everything. When I got home to Knoxville, my mother was waiting on the porch, 60 years old and still strong with gray hair and eyes like mine. She hugged me tight, didn't ask questions, just held on like she was afraid I might disappear. That night over dinner, she asked what I'd been doing in Mississippi, taking care of prisoners, teaching them English. German prisoners. Yes, ma'am. She was quiet for a moment. Sarah would have liked that. That's what they told me. They were right. She reached across the table, took my hand. I'm proud of you, Billy, for not letting the war make you hard. It did make me hard, Mama, just in different ways. Maybe. But you're still here, still trying. That counts for something. I looked at my mother, this woman who'd lost her only daughter and nearly lost her only son, and saw the same thing I'd seen in Grace Morrison. The determination to keep going, to not let the darkness win. Yeah, I said, I guess it does. Winter came to Tennessee and I settled into civilian life. Got a job teaching history at the local high school. Started trying to sleep through the night without nightmares. Failed more often than I succeeded. In February 1946, I got a letter from Camp Clinton. Official notice that the German prisoners were being repatriated. They'd ship out in March, arrive in Europe by April. Start trying to rebuild lives in a country that had been bombed back to the Stone Age. I wondered if Grace would keep her promise, if she'd tell people the truth, if anyone would listen. I didn't have to wonder long. Tennessee felt smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just gotten used to thinking in terms of continents instead of counties. Either way, coming home was harder than leaving had been. I spent November settling in, found a small apartment above a hardware store in downtown Knoxville, bought furniture from the Salvation Army, hung my uniform in the closet and tried not to look at it too often. The Bronze Star went in a drawer. The Purple Hearts went into the same drawer. Sarah's last letter stayed in my wallet, folded so many times the creases were starting to tear. I got a letter from Private Wilson in December. He'd been discharged, gone back to Brooklyn. Sarge, he wrote, I've been thinking about those German women, about the one who threw up from eating too much, about how we gave them food, though they were the enemy. I didn't understand it then. I think I'm starting to now. I wrote back, understanding takes time, Wilson, but you're getting there. The high school hired me to start after Christmas break. American history, they said. Teach the kids what the war was about. Make sure they understand what we fought for. I said yes because I needed the money and because I did not know what else to do with myself. December came cold and gray. I walked with a cane now. The knee had gotten worse, not better. The doctor said it would keep getting worse until they replaced the whole joint, and that was years away if it happened at all. So I learned to live with the pain the way you learn to live with anything if you don't have a choice. Christmas Eve, my mother made dinner. Just the two of us in the house where I'd grown up. The table felt too big with only 2 place settings. Sarah's chair sat empty the way it had for 4 years now. We didn't talk about her. Didn't need to. Her absence was louder than any conversation. You gonna be all right, Billy? My mother asked over pie. Sure, Mama. That's not what I asked. I set down my fork. Looked at this woman who'd buried a daughter and was watching her son try to pretend he wasn't broken. I don't know, I said honestly. Some days I think I'm fine. Other days, I can't remember why I bothered coming home. She reached across the table, took my hand. Hers was rough from 60 years of farm work and housework and all the other work that never showed up in history books. You came home because you're alive, Billy. And being alive means something, even when it doesn't feel like it. What if I don't know what it means anymore? Then you figure it out, one day at a time. That's all any of us can do. I squeezed her hand. Sarah would have known what to do. Sarah would have told you the same thing I'm telling you. Stop comparing yourself to a memory and start being the person you are now. She was right. She was always right. But that didn't make it easier. I started teaching in January 1947. 23 students, mix of boys and girls, ages 14 to 18. They looked at me with a combination of curiosity and something else. Pity, maybe. The crippled veteran who'd come home to teach because he couldn't do anything else. The first day I wrote my name on the blackboard. Sergeant William Carter. Then I erased the sergeant. Just Mr. Carter, I said. The war's over. No need for ranks anymore. A boy in the back raised his hand. Tommy Henderson, according to my roster. 16 years old, too young for the war, but old enough to have opinions about it. Mr. Carter, is it true you were at Normandy? Yes. Did you kill Germans? The classroom went silent. 23 pairs of eyes watched me, waiting to see if I'd or tell the truth or do something in between. Yes, I said, I did. How many? I don't know. I never counted. Why not? I leaned against my desk, took the weight off my bad knee. Because they weren't trophies, Tommy. They were people. Somebody's son or brother or father. And I killed them because that was my job. But I didn't enjoy it and I didn't celebrate it, and I sure as hell didn't count them like deer on a hunting trip. The room stayed quiet. Tommy Henderson looked uncomfortable, like he'd asked a question and gotten an answer he didn't expect. War isn't a game, I continued. It's not an adventure. It's people killing each other for reasons that seem important at the time and questionable afterward. And if you take nothing else from this class, take this: every war is a failure. A failure to talk, a failure to compromise, a failure to see the other side as human. A girl near the front, Mary Catherine O'Brien, raised her hand. But we had to fight, didn't we? Because of Hitler. Yes, we did. Sometimes fighting is necessary, but that doesn't make it good. And it doesn't mean we should be eager to do it again. I taught them about the war, but not the way they expected. Not about heroes and glory and righteous victory, about choices and consequences, about young men dying in mud and young women starving in cities, and all the ways violence ripples outward long after the shooting stops. They didn't always like it. Some parents complained I was being unpatriotic. The principal called me in twice to discuss my teaching methods. But I kept at it because if I couldn't make them understand that the enemy was human, then what had been the point of Jackson, Mississippi? What had been the point of any of it? February brought the letter from Grace. I'd been expecting it since Christmas, but actually holding it in my hands made it real in a way I wasn't prepared for. I read it in my apartment, sitting in the one good chair I owned with winter rain drumming against the windows. Her handwriting had gotten neater. Her English had gotten better. But the pain underneath the words was still there, sharp and immediate. Dear Sergeant Carter, I hope this letter finds you well. I am home, or what is left of home. Hamburg is gone, 80% destroyed. But my mother is alive. She was living in a basement. When I found her, she did not recognize me at first. I had changed too much. I am working as nurse at University Hospital. Every day I treat people hurt by the war, people who lost everything. And I tell them what I learned in America. I tell them about Jackson, Mississippi, about the bookstore owner who lost her son but still showed me kindness, about the woman at the diner who gave us food, about you, Sergeant Carter, who gave us bread and treated us like people. Some believe me. Some say I am liar, that I am poisoned by American propaganda. But I keep telling the truth because that is what I promised. Evelyn Hayes has bakery in Munich. She writes to me. She is doing well. She say the smell of fresh bread makes her cry sometimes, remembering that day in Jackson. She says the nightmares have stopped. The ones where she is back in Germany starving. She dreams of bread now, she says. Warm bread and kindness. She wanted you to know that you saved her life that day in Jackson. Not from death, from hatred. Margaret Foster is dead. She killed herself in 1948. Her mother wrote to tell me. She say Margaret never recovered from learning the truth. I wish I could have saved her. But some people cannot be saved. I think of you often. Wonder if you are teaching like you said you would. Wonder if you are happy. I hope you are. You deserve happiness after everything. Thank you, Sergeant Carter, for showing me that not all Americans are monsters, for helping me see that the enemy was not you, it was the lies we were told. And thank you for remembering that we were people, even when it would have been easier to hate us. I will never forget. With gratitude, Grace Morrison. I read the letter 3 times, then I sat down and wrote back. Told her about Tennessee, about teaching, about how I was trying to make Sarah proud, about how she should keep telling her story, keep fighting the lies, keep being brave. We wrote back and forth for years. Her English got better. My understanding of what we'd done at Camp Clinton got deeper. And slowly, very slowly, the war started to feel like something that had happened to someone else. Someone younger, someone who didn't know yet how complicated everything would become. Spring came slowly to Tennessee. The trees started budding. The rain turned warmer. And I kept teaching, kept walking with my cane, kept trying to figure out what it meant to be alive when so many others weren't. One afternoon in April, Tommy Henderson stayed after class. Mr. Carter, can I ask you something? Sure, Tommy. Why do you teach us about the Germans like they were people? My dad says they were animals. Says we should have killed them all. I sat on the edge of my desk, took the weight off my knee. Your dad was in the war. Yes, sir. Pacific Theater. He doesn't talk about it much, but when he does, he's real angry. I understand that anger, Tommy. I felt it too. Still do sometimes. I paused, choosing my words carefully. But here's the thing. If we turn the enemy into animals, into monsters, then we can do anything to them and feel justified. We can kill them without guilt, torture them without conscience, become the very thing we're fighting against. But they started it. Hitler started it. Hitler started it. Most Germans just followed. Some because they believed. Some because they were scared. Some because they didn't know how to say no. And that's the lesson, Tommy. That's what you need to understand. Evil doesn't usually look like a monster. It looks like ordinary people making small compromises until the compromises aren't small anymore. Tommy was quiet, processing. Then, did you meet Germans besides the ones you killed? Yes, I met prisoners, talked to them, taught some of them English. What were they like? Scared, confused, trying to figure out how their whole world had been a lie. I thought about Grace, about the way she'd looked at the bread in Jackson. Human Tommy. They were human, just like us. He left looking thoughtful. I didn't know if I'd gotten through to him, but I'd tried. That had to count for something. May brought another letter from Grace. Longer this time, more detailed. She wrote about her work at the hospital, about the patients she treated, Germans and occupation soldiers alike, about the slow, painful process of rebuilding Hamburg one brick at a time. She wrote about the reactions when she told her story. Some people called her a traitor, said she'd been brainwashed by American propaganda. Others listened quietly, thoughtfully, and asked questions. Young people mostly. The ones who hadn't been old enough to fight, but were old enough to see the ruins and wonder what it had all been for. Evelyn's bakery was doing well. She'd named it Mississippi Bread, which made the German customers confused, but the American soldiers smile. She sold out every day. Sometimes people came just to smell the bread, she said, because it reminded them of before the war, when there was enough of everything and nobody was afraid. Margaret haunted the letter like a ghost. Grace wrote about visiting her grave, about wishing she'd done more, said more, tried harder, about the guilt of surviving when others couldn't. I understand that guilt, I wrote back. I carry it every day. For Sarah, for the men in my platoon who didn't make it home, for everyone the war took and kept. But we don't honor them by destroying ourselves. We honor them by living, by being better than the war tried to make us. I didn't know if she'd believe me. I barely believed it myself. But it was the truth as best as I understood it, and truth was the only currency I had left. Summer came hot and humid. School let out. I spent my days reading and walking and trying not to think too much. The knee was worse. Some days I couldn't make it down the stairs without stopping to rest. The doctor said surgery might help. I said I'd think about it. We both knew I wouldn't do it. Couldn't afford it even if I wanted to. In June, I got a letter from Colonel Thompson. He was retiring, he said. Moving to Florida with his wife. Wanted to fish and forget about the war. But he'd heard I was teaching and wanted to tell me he was proud. What I'd done at Camp Clinton had mattered more than I knew. The reports from Germany said the prisoners who'd been on those cultural tours were among the least hostile to occupation forces. Some were even helping with reconstruction efforts, acting as translators and liaisons. It's a small thing, he wrote, but small things matter. You showed them we were human. Some of them remembered. That's all we can ask. I folded the letter, added it to the collection. Small things. Maybe that's all life was now. Small kindnesses, small truths, small acts of defiance against the darkness. The school year started again in September. New students, but the same questions. The same curiosity about the war. The same mixture of admiration and pity when they looked at my cane. I taught them about Normandy, about the crossing of the Rhine, about the camps we'd liberated and what we'd found there. I didn't spare them the details. If they were old enough to glorify war, they were old enough to know what it actually meant. Mary Catherine O'Brien's older brother had died at Iwo Jima. She wrote an essay about him, about how he'd enlisted at 17, lied about his age, died at 18 on a beach 10,000 miles from home. She ended the essay with a question. Was it worth it? I didn't answer. Just wrote at the bottom, that's for you to decide. But decide based on truth, not propaganda. She came to me after class, face streaked with tears. I don't know how to decide. Then sit with the question. Live with it. The answer will come or it won't, but asking the question matters more than having an answer. My mother says I shouldn't question, says it's disrespectful to his memory. Your brother died so you could ask questions, so you could think freely. Seems to me the most respectful thing you can do is use that freedom. She nodded, wiped her eyes, left. I sat alone in the classroom, surrounded by desks and maps and the weight of 23 kids trying to make sense of a world their parents' generation had nearly destroyed. October brought cold rain and memories I didn't want. 2 years since I'd left Camp Clinton. 2 years since I'd said goodbye to Grace Morrison and 15 other women who'd been my responsibility for a few short weeks. I wondered where they were now, if they'd kept their promises, if they'd found ways to live with what they'd learned. If Margaret Foster was still the only one who'd chosen death over truth. The letter that arrived in November answered some of those questions. Dear Mr. Carter, I hope this letter finds you well. I am writing with news, some good, some sad. Evelyn Hayes married an American soldier last month. His name is Robert, and he was stationed in Munich. They met at her bakery. She says he reminds her of you, kind and patient. They are moving to America next year. To Ohio. She is nervous, but excited. She asked me to tell you, thank you, for showing her that America was not what Nazis said it was. Clara Schmidt works for the American military government now as a nurse. She treats everyone German and American. She says it is her way of making things right. She asked me to send her regards. The others are scattered. Some I have lost contact with. Some have written. All of them remember Jackson. All of them carry pieces of that day. As for me, I continue at the hospital. I continue to tell the story, and I have started writing it down. A book, maybe, about what it was like to be captured, to be shown kindness by the enemy, to learn that everything you believed was a lie. I do not know if anyone will want to read it, but I need to write it. For Margaret, for the others, for myself. I think of you often, Mr. Carter. Wonder if your knee is better, if your students listen, if you have found peace, or at least something close to it. Thank you for writing back, for not forgetting us, for treating us like people even when we did not deserve it. With continued gratitude, Grace Morrison, P.S. I still have the book Mrs. Ellis gave me. I have read it 5 times now. Each time I understand more. About freedom, about what it means, about what we lost and what we might still find. I read the letter twice. Then I pulled out paper and started writing. Dear Grace, your news about Evelyn made me smile. First time I've smiled in weeks. Tell her congratulations. Tell her Ohio is cold, but the people are good. Tell her I'm glad she found someone who reminds her of kindness. Write your book. Even if nobody reads it, write it. The truth needs to be told, especially the truths nobody wants to hear. Margaret deserves to have her story told. They all do. My knee is about the same, bad days and worse days. But I'm teaching and some of the kids are actually listening. That has to count for something. You asked if I've found peace, honest answer no. But I've found purpose. Teaching these kids that war isn't glory, that the enemy is human, that the choices we make matter, even the small ones. Maybe that's close enough. Keep going, Grace. Keep telling your story. Keep fighting the lies. The world needs people like you, people who are brave enough to admit they were wrong and smart enough to learn from it. Your friend William Carter. I mailed it the next day. Friend I'd written. When had that happened? When had Grace Morrison stopped being a prisoner and become a friend? I couldn't pinpoint the moment. Maybe there hadn't been one. Maybe it had been gradual, built from letters and shared understanding and the recognition that we were both trying to survive the same war, just from different sides. Winter settled over Tennessee like a blanket, heavy and cold and hard to shake off. I taught through it, walked through it, lived through it. The days were short and the nights were long, and sometimes I'd wake up at 3 in the morning thinking I was back in Belgium, back in the snow, back in the place where 12 good men had died and I'd lived for no reason I could understand. Christmas came and went. My mother made dinner again. The table was still too big. Sarah's chair was still empty. But this time when my mother asked if I was all right, I said maybe, and meant it. The letter from Germany arrived in February 1948. Different handwriting this time, shaky, uncertain. Not Grace's neat script. Dear Sergeant Carter, my name is Helena Foster. I am mother of Margaret Foster. You may remember her. She was prisoner at Camp Clinton. My daughter is dead. She took her own life last month. I found her in her room. There was a note. It said she could not live with what she had learned. About the camps, about the lies, about everything. I am writing because Margaret kept a journal. In it, she wrote about you, about the day you took them to Jackson. She wrote that you were kind, even to her, even when she hated you. She wrote that you tried to help her. I want you to know it was not your fault. The war broke my daughter. The truth finished what the war started. But you tried. That matters. She also wrote about Grace Morrison, how Grace tried to save her, how Grace stayed with her even after Margaret hurt her. I have written to Miss Morrison as well, to thank her, and to tell her not to blame herself. I do not know why I am writing to you. Perhaps because my daughter wrote about you and I wanted you to know she is gone. Perhaps because I need someone to understand that she was not always full of hate. For the war, she was a happy child. She liked to draw pictures and sing songs. The war took that girl away, and the truth took what was left. Thank you for being kind to her even briefly. Thank you for trying. With sorrow, Helena Foster. I sat in my apartment holding the letter, feeling the weight of Margaret Foster's death settle on my shoulders. 19 years old. Dead because the truth had been too heavy to carry. Dead because nobody had taught her how to live with guilt. Dead because the war had broken something in her that couldn't be fixed. I wrote back to Helena Foster, told her I was sorry, told her Margaret had been brave to try, even if trying hadn't been enough. Told her that every casualty of the war deserved to be mourned, even the ones who died years after the shooting stopped. Then I wrote to Grace, told her the news, told her it wasn't her fault, told her that some people can't be saved no matter how hard we try, and that didn't mean we should stop trying. Her response came quickly, faster than usual. 3 pages of grief and guilt and questions that had no answers. Why couldn't she save Margaret? What more could she have done? How many others would die from truth they couldn't survive? I don't know, I wrote back, but I know this. You're still alive. You're still fighting, and every person you help, every story you tell, every mind you change, that's Margaret's legacy too. Not the hate she couldn't let go of, the hope you're trying to build. The letters continued back and forth across the ocean. Grace sent updates on her book, on her work at the hospital, on the slow reconstruction of Hamburg. I sent stories about my students, about the ones who got it and the ones who didn't, about the small victories and the constant struggle to make them understand that war was always a failure even when it was necessary. Years passed. 1948 became 1949, became 1950. The Korean War started, and suddenly everyone was excited about fighting again. My students wanted to enlist, wanted to be heroes like their fathers. I tried to talk them out of it. Most didn't listen. Tommy Henderson joined the Marines in 1951, shipped out to Korea in 1952, came home in a box in 1953. 19 years old, same age Margaret Foster had been when she'd given up. I went to his funeral, stood in the back while his mother cried and his father stared straight ahead with empty eyes. Mary Catherine O'Brien was there too. She caught my eye and I saw the question on her face. Was it worth it? I still didn't have an answer. Grace's book was published in 1954. Chains That Never Were, she called it. It was only available in German, but she sent me a copy anyway. I couldn't read most of it, but I recognized the names. Jackson, Woolworths, Mrs. Ellis, Aunt Ruth, and my name, Sergeant William Carter, the man who showed us we were wrong. The book didn't sell well. Nobody wanted to read about German women being treated kindly by Americans. It complicated the narrative, made heroes less heroic and enemies less monstrous. But it found an audience eventually. Young people mostly. The ones who'd grown up in the ruins and wanted to understand how it had all gone so wrong. She sent me reviews. Some praised her honesty, some called her a traitor. Some said she was lying, that Americans would never have been so kind. The truth was too strange to believe. Keep going, I wrote. The truth always sounds strange at first. In 1956, I got a letter that made me cry for the first time since Sarah died. Dear William, I am coming to America to visit Evelyn in Ohio. And if you are willing, I would like to come to Tennessee, to meet you in person, to thank you face to face for what you did. I understand if you say no. I understand if it would be too difficult. But I wanted to ask because you changed my life. And I would like to see the man who did that, to see if he is as kind in person as he was in my memory. Please let me know. Your friend Grace. I wrote back immediately. Yes, come, please come. She arrived in October. I picked her up at the train station, recognizing her immediately, even though she'd changed. Older now, 38 instead of 27. Gray in her dark hair, lines around her eyes, but the same careful way of holding herself. The same intelligence in her gaze. Sergeant Carter. Just William now, or Bill. The war's over. William then. She smiled. You look different than I remember. Older, grayer, more broken. No, more at peace. We walked through Knoxville, my cane clicking on the sidewalk, her matching her pace to mine. I showed her the school where I taught, the apartment where I lived, the places that had become my life. That evening we sat on my mother's porch drinking coffee and watching the sun set over Tennessee hills that had never been bombed. Tell me about the book, I said. It is a small thing. Not many people read it, but some do, and some of those write to me. Tell me it helped them understand. That makes it worth it. What about you? Did it help you? She was quiet for a long time. Yes, writing it helped, telling the story helped, but I still carry the guilt for believing, for not asking questions. For Margaret. Margaret made her own choices. I know, but I still wish I could have saved her. Me too. We sat in comfortable silence, two survivors of the same war, trying to make sense of what had happened and what it meant. William, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you think it mattered what you did at Camp Clinton? Showing us Jackson, being kind. I thought about Tommy Henderson in a box, about Mary Catherine O'Brien's unanswered question, about 12 men frozen in Belgium and a sister who died before she could save anyone. I don't know, I said, honestly. Some days I think it did. Other days, I think the world just keeps spinning and nothing we do really changes anything. But you still teach. Yeah. And you still write to me. Yeah. Then it matters. Even if we cannot see how, it matters. She stayed 3 days. We talked about the war and the peace and all the complicated spaces in between, about guilt and redemption and whether there was really a difference, about the small ways we try to make things right and whether that's ever enough. On her last night, she gave me a copy of her book. She'd translated one chapter into English. The chapter about Jackson. Read it, she said, when you doubt. When you wonder if it mattered, read it and remember. I did read it after she left. Read about seeing America for the first time through the eyes of someone who'd been taught to hate it. About the shock of abundance. About Mrs. Ellis and her dead son and her impossible forgiveness. About a sergeant who bought bread for the enemy because they were hungry. The chapter ended with a line that stayed with me. He did not chain us, and in not chaining us, he set us free. I folded the pages carefully, put them in the drawer with Sarah's letters and Grace's other letters and all the pieces of the war I tried to save. Outside Tennessee was preparing for winter. The leaves were turning, the air was getting cold, and I was 38 years old teaching American history to kids who'd never known war, trying to make sure they never wanted to. It wasn't much, but maybe Grace was right. Maybe it mattered anyway. Years later, near the end, when my students would ask if the war had been worth it, I'd tell them about Jackson, Mississippi, about 15 German women on a bus expecting chains and finding kindness instead, about how some of them went home and told the truth and changed minds one person at a time, about how one of them became my friend, even though she'd been my enemy, because war doesn't actually have the final say in who we become. Was it worth it? I still didn't know, but I knew this. We'd tried. We'd chosen kindness over hate. We'd treated enemies like people, and some of them had remembered. In a world that kept finding new reasons to fight that had to be worth something. I pulled out Sarah's letter one last time. The paper was nearly transparent now, the ink fading, the creases threatening to tear. But the words were still there, still true. Remember that the enemy is just somebody else's brother, somebody else's son. I folded it carefully, pressed it against my heart. I remembered Sarah, I whispered to the empty room. I remembered, and I think some of them did too. Outside Tennessee prepared for another winter. My students would come back in spring asking the same questions, needing the same answers. Grace would write again from Hamburg, still fighting her own war against forgetting. And I would keep teaching, keep remembering, keep choosing kindness even when hate seemed easier. Because 15 women on a bus had taught me something. The chains that matter most are the ones we choose to wear. And the freedom that matters most is the freedom to be better than the war tried to make us. That was Sarah's gift to me, and Grace's, and even Margaret's in her tragic way. It wasn't much, but maybe it was enough. It had to be.